Among the alien warriors, there was an unspoken ripple of panic. These were not rookies but seasoned fighters who had seen countless battles. They knew strength, raw and unyielding, and had always relied on their sheer size to intimidate or overwhelm. But this was different. This human soldier, with his quiet confidence and his uncanny ability to predict and counter their every move, had managed to expose their weaknesses. Their towering frames and colossal strength were suddenly irrelevant against Lucas's relentless wave of precision and strategy. They could no longer dismiss him or his army of bots. In fact, they were beginning to understand that they were no match for it. Watching from the sidelines, some of the alien commanders exchanged uneasy glances, their pride bruised and their honor at stake. They couldn't afford to lose face, especially not in front of a crowd that had once cheered them on as the mightiest warriors in the galaxy. Desperation seeped into their ranks, and with a sudden, furious energy, they started charging at Lucas's bots with renewed aggression. But their attempts only seemed to play into Lucas's hands, as if he'd anticipated this very shift. His bots shifted and adapted, forming new formations that absorbed the aliens' wild attacks and redirected their force back at them. Lucas watched as the alien giants grew reckless, throwing punches and kicks that barely connected. They were wearing themselves out, falling for the traps he had woven seamlessly into his strategy. His bots swarmed around the giants, closing in tighter, cutting off any chance for retreat. Every movement was a testament to the trust Lucas had in his team. A perfect blend of man and machine, a calculated dance that left no opening unguarded, no weakness exploited. It was mesmerizing to behold, and Lucas knew he was creating an unforgettable display, one that no one in the audience would ever forget. The crowd, which had once mocked and jeered, was now silent, entirely captivated by the drama unfolding in the arena. The spectators were on the edge of their seats, eyes wide, as they watched their champions crumble under the relentless onslaught of Lucas's tiny army. The aliens' laughter had been replaced by awe and, for some, a growing sense of dread. For the first time, they were witnessing the might of human strategy and technology, a level of precision and skill that was almost unnerving. It was as if Lucas's tiny army had a mind of its own, anticipating and countering every move with an uncanny understanding of the battlefield. And then, in a dramatic twist, Lucas raised his hand and signaled for a tactical shift. The tiny army moved as one, breaking off into smaller, faster units that began targeting the alien giants individually. The bots coordinated seamlessly, isolating each warrior and exploiting their vulnerabilities with swift, pinpoint strikes. One by one, the giants faltered, their immense frames rendered almost helpless by the onslaught of the tiny but mighty machines. The warriors staggered, falling to their knees, their massive egos shattered as they realized they were no match for the tactical genius behind this tiny army. Lucas's face remained impassive, his focus never wavering. He could feel the momentum shifting entirely in his favor, and he was careful not to let his guard down. The alien commanders, now frantic, tried to rally their troops, shouting orders and attempting to reorganize. But it was too late. Lucas had already foreseen their tactics and had countermeasures in place. The battlefield was his to control, and every movement of his tiny army was like the stroke of a master artist, each but an essential part of the masterpiece he was creating. The alien spectators, once dismissive, now looked on in stunned silence, their previous confidence shattered. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. A human, small in stature compared to the giants around him, had taken command of the arena. His army of tiny machines was an unstoppable force, transforming every sneer and jeer into a reverent, hushed admiration. There was no denying it anymore. This was not just a human with some robots. This was a soldier who understood warfare on a level they had never encountered, and his tiny army was an extension of his own will, a force as formidable as any they had ever faced. Lucas's gaze swept over the remaining alien warriors, their pride bruised, their resolve fading. He knew that he had not only won the battle, but had forever altered the perception of humanity in the eyes of these alien species. This was no longer just a contest. It was a statement. He had shown them that size and brute strength meant nothing when faced with strategy, precision, and relentless determination. His tiny army had proven that sometimes it wasn't the biggest force that won the fight, but the one with the most heart, the sharpest mind, and an unwavering belief in its mission. The battle continued, but Lucas knew it was only a matter of time before the last alien would yield. His army, small but mighty, moved like a wave of inevitability, each but an extension of his will, closing in and driving home the truth that the galaxy's mightiest warriors had just met their match in a tiny army, led by a human soldier who knew no fear. As the battle raged on, the arena felt almost surreal, a place where size and strength no longer mattered, where the smallest warriors held the upper hand against giants who once seemed unbeatable. Lucas's bots continued their tireless advance, sweeping over the field in calculated bursts of speed and agility. Each bot moved with a relentless, unfeeling efficiency, their metal limbs gleaming under the harsh lights, their sensors constantly adjusting, tracking every possible threat with pinpoint accuracy. The alien warriors, once a wall of power and pride, now looked weary, their confidence shattered and replaced by a kind of desperate disbelief. The crowd watched in stunned silence, their awe tinged with a hint of fear as they finally grasped the implications of what they were witnessing. It wasn't just that a human had managed to take command in a battlefield of alien giants. It was the realization that this human soldier, with his fleet of tiny machines, was reshaping the rules of combat right before their eyes. Alien commanders, once masters of their armies, found themselves helpless, unable to devise any effective counter to the tiny, swift-moving army Lucas controlled. And for each warrior that fell, each failed counterattack, the reputation of these once-celebrated champions diminished further. Lucas, ever focused, remained a figure of calm intensity, his eyes never straying from the battlefield. Every glance, every motion was calculated, and his command center was a hive of quiet control. In this high-stakes game, he understood that every second counted, and he pushed his bots harder, watching as they responded flawlessly to his directions. Though the alien giants still outnumbered him, Lucas knew that the tide had turned irreversibly. Each bot was an extension of his own training, his own knowledge of war, and he wielded them like an artist applying the final strokes to a masterpiece. As his bots encircled one of the most powerful alien warriors, a massive figure with skin like armor and hands that could crush boulders, the crowd gasped, certain that this would be the turning point. Surely, this warrior could put an end to the tiny army's advance. But Lucas had anticipated this final attempt. With a flick of his wrist, he signaled his bots to swarm, moving in perfect unison to overwhelm the giant before he could even land a strike. The once mighty warrior roared, swinging his massive arms, but each swing found only air as Lucas's bots darted in and out, chipping away at his defenses with quick, relentless strikes. The crowd, once again captivated by the seemingly impossible odds, leaned in, holding their breath. The warrior's mighty bellows filled the arena, echoing off the walls, but his cries were met only with the hum of the bots as they continued their coordinated assault. Lucas's expression remained calm, unfazed by the noise or the spectacle of it all. He was locked in, lost in the flow of the battle. To him, this was a dance of precision, of perfect timing and execution. Each move his bots made served a purpose. Each strike was carefully placed to bring down his opponent without wasting a single motion. And when the alien giant finally staggered, a hush fell over the crowd as they realized what had happened. The last hope of turning the tide had crumbled under the might of the tiny army. The alien warriors, who had once laughed and scoffed, now stood in stunned silence, their pride obliterated. It was over. Lucas's tiny army had prevailed. But the human soldier didn't stop there. He didn't need to attack anymore, didn't need to fight. He had already won. And yet, he commanded his bots to line up in formation, forming a path that led directly to him, a sign of respect and a subtle invitation for any remaining warriors who still dared to challenge him. The arena, once filled with the deafening noise of battle and cheers, was now silent, as alien warriors watched Lucas with a newfound reverence. Lucas raised his hand, signaling his bots to power down, and the machines stilled, standing like sentinels at his command. The crowd looked on, no longer mockingly, but with awe and an undeniable respect. Lucas, without a single word, had proven himself a force to be reckoned with, not just as a soldier, but as a strategist, a commander who could see beyond the obvious, who could turn what seemed like weakness into an unstoppable strength. The once mocked tiny army now stood as a symbol of innovation and resilience, and Lucas knew that this battle would be remembered across the galaxy. But as Lucas surveyed the field, he sensed that the lesson wasn't over. This battle had shown the aliens what humans were capable of, but he knew it was only the beginning. He had opened their eyes to a new way of thinking, of fighting, but there were countless challenges ahead, countless battles that would require the same strength and ingenuity. And as the alien commanders exchanged looks of respect, and perhaps a hint of fear, Lucas gave them a small nod, acknowledging their strength, their power, but also the reality that the galaxy was changing. His gaze drifted toward the stars above, and he felt a quiet thrill of excitement. This victory was only the start. With the tiny army by his side, with the strategy and technology that only a human mind could bring to the battlefield, Lucas knew that the galaxy held boundless possibilities. He didn't know what new challenges awaited him, what new rivals he would face, but he was ready to. As Lucas looked across the arena, he could see that the alien warriors, those giants who had once jeered at him, now regarded him with awe. Their hulking forms were battered, their pride bruised, and there was a quiet respect in their eyes that had been absent when this battle began. Lucas had achieved what he had set out to do: prove that strength alone was no match for ingenuity, precision, and strategy. Yet, he felt a lingering tension in the air, a sense that this victory was incomplete, as though the battle had only set the stage for something much larger. The alien commanders gathered near the center of the arena, murmuring in their deep, guttural tones. One among them, a towering figure with an intricate tattoo of honor marks spiraling up his arm, stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Lucas with newfound reverence. His voice boomed through the arena, a low rumble of grudging admiration. "You are no ordinary warrior, human," he began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. "You have shown us that even the smallest spark can ignite a fire that burns brighter than any sun. But tell us, Lucas, why do you fight? Is it for glory, for honor, or something more?" Lucas met the commander's gaze, his face calm, his eyes intense. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the question, knowing that his answer could either deepen their respect or erode it. "I fight not for glory or honor," he said, his voice steady but carrying an unmistakable conviction. "I fight because in every battle, in every challenge, we are given a chance to grow, to become something greater than we were before. I fight for the belief that even the smallest among us has the power to change the course of history." A murmur rippled through the alien crowd as they digested his words. Many of them, born and raised to value strength above all else, found themselves questioning the ideals they had held for so long. But Lucas's answer struck something deeper, a recognition of resilience and adaptability that went beyond brute force. They were witnessing a kind of strength they had never fully understood, a power born not from sheer size, but from intellect, creativity, and an indomitable spirit. The tattooed commander nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Then you have taught us more than any warrior ever has," he admitted, his voice softened with a strange humility. "We have always believed that strength is our greatest asset, that size alone would make us invincible. But today, you have shown us that a new kind of warrior has entered the galaxy, one who fights with more than muscle and might." As Lucas listened to the commander's words, he sensed a shift, not just in the alien warriors before him, but in the entire crowd that had gathered to witness the battle. Their former hostility had faded, replaced by curiosity, respect, and perhaps even a touch of admiration. It was clear that his message had resonated far beyond the battlefield, sparking a ripple of change that would continue long after the dust had settled. But just as Lucas allowed himself a moment of relief, a sudden tremor shook the ground beneath them. The arena's floor cracked, and a low, ominous hum filled the air. Lucas turned, his instincts flaring as the source of the disturbance became clear. Above the arena, a massive ship descended, casting a shadow over the stands. It was unlike anything Lucas had ever seen, a sleek, imposing vessel bristling with advanced weaponry. Its presence alone radiated an aura of power and menace. The alien crowd gasped, their expressions turning from awe to fear. The ship's insignia marked it as part of the Tlaloc fleet, a notorious group of mercenaries known for their ruthlessness and their penchant for conquest. And as the ship hovered above, it became evident that they had arrived to make an example of the tiny army that had dared to defy convention. A voice crackled over the ship's loudspeakers, cold and authoritative. "So, this is the infamous human who defeated the giants," the voice sneered. "Impressive, but ultimately insignificant. You may have proven your tactics today, Lucas, but against the Tlaloc, no amount of strategy can save you." Lucas felt the weight of the threat pressing down on him, but he stood tall, undaunted. His tiny army, sensing the danger, powered up, their once neutral sensors glowing red as they prepared to face this new enemy. The Tlaloc warriors began descending from the ship, each one heavily armed and clad in armor that gleamed with an eerie metallic sheen. Lucas took a deep breath, his mind racing. He knew he was outmatched in terms of firepower and numbers, but he refused to back down. The giants he had just defeated, now his former adversaries, looked to him, their expressions uncertain but willing. For the first time, Lucas realized that he wasn't alone. These warriors, once his rivals, were now his allies, bound by the respect he had earned in battle. With a nod, Lucas addressed the alien warriors who had once mocked him. "Together, we can face them," he said, his voice carrying the unyielding resolve that had driven him this far. "They may have the weapons, the size, and the reputation, but we have something they'll never understand: courage, unity, and the will to fight for something greater than ourselves." Moved by his words, the giants stood beside him, forming a powerful alliance. The tiny army adjusted their formation, aligning with their new allies, ready to take on the Tlaloc forces. The crowd, sensing the magnitude of the moment, fell silent, their breath held as they watched this unexpected union unfold. The Tlaloc forces advanced, their leaders sneering as he watched the gathering below. But Lucas was ready. He raised his hand, signaling his bots to engage, and together with the giants, he charged forward. The arena erupted in chaos as the clash between the unlikely allies and the Tlaloc began. Lucas moved with precision, directing his bots to exploit every opening, every weakness in the Tlaloc's armor. The giants, using their immense strength, smashed through the enemy ranks, their movements coordinated in a way that left no doubt about their newfound respect for Lucas. The battle was fierce, intense, a test of every lesson Lucas had ever learned. And as the Tlaloc forces faltered, the giants and bots pressed on, each strike resonating with the unbreakable bond they had formed. In that moment, they weren't just warriors. They were legends in the making, fighting not just for victory, but for a shared belief in resilience, unity, and the power of a tiny army that could defy all odds. As the final Tlaloc warrior fell, the arena erupted in cheers, the crowd no longer indifferent or mocking, but filled with admiration and pride. Lucas stood at the center, surrounded by his tiny army and his newfound allies, feeling the weight of the moment. He had done more than win a battle. He had sparked a change that would ripple through the galaxy, a new era where strength was defined not by size, but by spirit. The alien commander approached him, extending a massive hand. "Today, you have changed us, Lucas," he said solemnly. "You have shown us the strength of unity, the power of courage. The galaxy will remember this day, and it will remember you." Lucas shook his hand, a quiet smile on his face. As he looked out over the arena, he felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that his tiny army had proven its worth, that he had shown the galaxy a new path. And as he and his allies left the battlefield, the stars above seemed brighter, filled with endless possibilities. In that moment, Lucas knew his journey was just beginning, and that the tiny army would continue to challenge, inspire, and change the galaxy one battle at a time. In the sprawling arena of alien warriors, the scene was one of raw power and intimidation. Hundreds of towering figures filled the expanse, each more imposing than the last. They came from planets across the galaxy, flaunting massive muscles, strange weaponry, and skin colors that shifted with their moods. There, under the harsh glow of countless interstellar lights, the giants eyed each other with silent rivalry. But soon, all eyes turned to the newest contender, a battalion of small, compact machines assembled in precise rows at the edge of the field. This tiny army, as they were dubbed, looked like a joke, a sideshow compared to the titanic soldiers surrounding them. Alien warriors snickered, elbowing each other, as their gazes passed over the small bots. They were unlike anything the spectators had expected in this galactic arena. These robots had no flashy exoskeletons, no glistening armor that signified might. Instead, they looked modest, practical, each one about half the size of the average warrior there, with cold, precise movements that gave no hint of emotion. Despite their uniform design, the lack of ostentatious weaponry made them appear less like a real army and more like a test run gone wrong. Whispers rippled through the crowd, snide remarks about the tiny army unworthy of a true galactic fight. And that's when the murmurs reached the ears of the commander of the tiny army, a human soldier named Lucas. Hidden at the heart of the formation, Lucas observed his surroundings with keen eyes. He was the lone human, smaller than the giants who could crush him with a single blow, but he carried himself with a quiet confidence. Though outnumbered and overshadowed by the imposing presence of these alien soldiers, Lucas understood what the others did not. His little battalion was built with precision and efficiency, made to strike fast, relentlessly, and unpredictably. The laughter of the crowd barely fazed him. In fact, it amused him. He knew these giants had likely never faced a human in battle before, and they had no idea what awaited them. As he raised his hand, signaling the command, the machines shifted in perfect harmony, an echo of his thoughts and strategies, programmed to respond to his every move. The giants in the arena continued to laugh, some even gesturing mockingly at the tiny army, unaware of the training, the hours of planning, and the sheer endurance that went into each of those seemingly insignificant bots. Lucas didn't need size or strength to win this battle. He had tactics. He adjusted his visor, which glowed with readouts and battle stats, showing him the positions and capabilities of every bot under his command. The alien warriors sneered as they witnessed his confidence, interpreting it as the arrogance of a naive soldier who didn't yet know his limits. But Lucas wasn't naive. He was deliberate. Each step, each pause, each signal was intentional, and his tiny army was prepared to operate with a precision that far surpassed the chaotic brawn of the alien forces. Then, with a single hand motion from Lucas, the tiny army launched into action. The alien warriors were taken aback, their laughter fading as they watched the swift, synchronized moves of the small machines. One by one, the bots began to close the distance, breaking into groups that wove around the towering warriors in unpredictable patterns. Lucas orchestrated their every move, exploiting the gaps in the aliens' defenses, finding weak spots, and leveraging the agility of his compact forces. The aliens tried to strike back, but the small bots moved too quickly, slipping under the giants' grasps and dodging blows with uncanny precision. For the first time, the crowd grew silent, watching as the tiny army evaded attacks that would have leveled any normal battalion. As the battle continued, Lucas's confidence grew. He watched the giants stumble, their power failing against the small army's relentless tactics. The compact bots moved with clockwork accuracy, reacting to Lucas's signals in real time, striking at calculated points with just enough force to destabilize the massive foes. No energy was wasted. Every action was purposeful. The aliens began to realize they were no longer dealing with mere machines. They were facing a coordinated force led by a human who understood every inch of the battlefield. Some of the alien warriors began to hesitate, their previously smug expressions giving way to uncertainty and confusion. Lucas felt the shift in their demeanor. He could see it in the way the aliens moved now, a slight hesitation in their steps, a faltering confidence that hadn't been there moments before. It was as though they were beginning to comprehend the depth of their mistake. He kept his expression neutral, hiding the satisfaction he felt at having rattled these warriors without needing to utter a single word. His tiny army was his voice, and their movements spoke volumes. The crowd, too, was no longer mocking. Instead, they leaned forward, their eyes glued to the seamless efficiency of the machines, each one a cog in Lucas's complex strategy. The battle shifted further as Lucas pressed forward, commanding the bots to advance into even bolder formations, cutting through the alien ranks with a strategy that seemed to defy conventional logic. The giants had size, strength, and raw power, but Lucas had adaptability and foresight. He could anticipate their moves, knowing where they'd strike next and positioning his bots to intercept, outmaneuver, and counter. Each time a giant warrior attempted to land a blow, a bot would slide into place to block or evade, shifting the battle's flow toward Lucas's favor. Slowly, the overwhelming confidence of the alien warriors gave way to frustration, and then something more: fear. They had laughed at the tiny army, but now they watched it dismantle their forces piece by piece. The silence of the crowd grew heavier as the outcome became clearer. Warriors who had been poised to mock now stood in disbelief, watching as one human and a battalion of small machines overtook what had once seemed like an unstoppable force. Lucas remained composed, issuing commands with a steady hand, watching his strategy unfold exactly as planned. He could feel the weight of every alien gaze on him now, their bewilderment giving way to an unspoken respect. As the tiny army pressed deeper into the ranks, the once overconfident alien warriors could only stand back, mesmerized by Lucas's tactical genius. The bots moved with a rhythmic intensity, dodging and advancing as if they were part of a dance choreographed to perfection. Lucas stayed focused, his fingers dancing over his control panel, eyes locked on his opponents, calculating every angle, predicting every move. His composure was unbreakable. He had planned for every contingency, every possible response from the giants. And now, with his bots executing each command flawlessly, he was beginning to enjoy the effect he was having on his opponents.